Whether he is the most famous artist on the planet, that I'm sure people would, dispute that and would name other names, but he is a global superstar.
He was just such a brilliant painter. He broke rules that hadn't been broken for centuries, and he did it his way.
He kind of is a bit like the tortured rock stars, Kurt Cobain or Jimi Hendrix, and he has that sort of rock star appeal.
We appreciate him for his struggle, for his energy, for his emotion, for his belief. He believed in himself.
Everybody has a different story about what happened to him.
He was a nice, quiet man.
Always skulking about.
Then he comes here with a girl who I reckon was out of his league, and the next thing I hear, he's killed himself.
This film is history in the making. The world's first ever fully painted feature film, exploring the tortured life and mysterious death of one of the world's greatest ever artists, Vincent van Gogh.
He was mad.
He was an interesting man.
He was a genius.
Starring Chris O'Dowd, Saoirse Ronan and Douglas Booth, it quite literally brings to life some of his most inspirational works. Rather than using computers to digitally animate it, all 64,500 frames have been laboriously painted. The vision of an Oscar-winning director and his wife.
I've done a lot of computer animation. If I thought I could get the same look of oil painting moving before your eyes in the computer, I would have probably done it in the computer, because I wouldn't have gone to all the trouble of finding 124 painters in 3 different countries, setting up 3 studios to achieve this and do it so painstakingly by hand. They actually move each brushstroke frame by frame, unless I thought it could come up with a look which you couldn't achieve any other way.
Despite their relatively small budget, the filmmakers managed to get a stellar cast on board who bought into the project, and perhaps it's no surprise when this is the closest they'll ever get to having their portrait painted by Van Gogh.
I've never worked on anything quite like this, and I probably won't ever again, because it's not like an animation where you just turn up and you do your voice and you go away. It's a performance that you put in, and you then, there's 2 artists, there's the actor and then there's the painter, and you both work to bring it to life, although I have to say they've put in a lot more work than I did. What did that nobody ever do for us? You see each brushstroke, you see it, and it has a texture to it that I believe other animations, however great, don't have, because it's been done by hand.
We paint 62,450 paintings, and to do that we need a lot of painters, and behind each of these black curtains we have a painter.
The film is 5 years in the making, involving more than 100 unbelievably talented and dedicated artists from all over the world.
So this is Yergin, who's done more shots on the film than anyone else. How long is this shot? It's 4 seconds, yeah? So it's 98 frames. So he does a quarter or a third of a second each day, so something like 20 days, just for that one shot of the cart going through with the women.
Most days I do about 6 to 7 frames. What you have to do is get the movement believable. And the other thing that happens, and I'm really bad at this, is that I'll move the face and I'll forget to move, say, the hairline. So her face looks like she's shifting and her hair stays the same. So you have to concentrate the whole time.
It's quite the antithesis of the high-tech studio you might expect for a feature animation. There are 3 studios, the lead here in Poland, where they're using an unprecedented process to take each frame filmed using actors and paint over every single one of them.
Basically, those 4 stages. The earliest stage, which is shooting it against a blue screen with actors. and then putting a reference over that. This is for the painters to make it easy for them to paint, and this bit was the final result.
So this is Douglas Booth
and Chris
Chris
O'Dowd.
O'Dowd.
If your postal service can't find him, what makes you think I can?
Just use your initiative, son. An important man like Mr. Theo Van Gogh. Ask around.
But what do I say when I find him?
It's amazing what the paint picks up and what these artists have managed to do with just even the tiny micro expressions. It was also fun to go and meet a bunch of painters that for 2 years have just been painting your face.
Oh, glad to see you're honouring God. Not like your friend.
My father's friend.
We cover around 130 original Vincent van Gogh paintings in the film and bring those to life. And 60 minutes of the film is in Vincent Technicolor, and the flashbacks are in this very nice black and white style.
Visually, Loving Vincent will undoubtedly blow audiences away, but at the heart of any great movie are the characters and the plot. And Van Gogh's madness, his genius, not to mention the mystery surrounding his death, were a gift for the scriptwriters working on this film. Vincent died on the 29th of July 1890 from gunshot wounds to the chest. And more than 125 years on, there's still speculation over whether it was suicide or even murder. It's these conflicting accounts of his last days that caught the imagination of the filmmakers of Loving Vincent.
Why he would kill himself when he was just succeeding for the first time in 8 years. So for 8 years he'd been struggling, he'd had many knockbacks, and then in the year of his death he had brilliant reviews, and also Monet declared him the most exciting new artist, and he seemed to be cured, he wasn't drinking as much anymore, and yet 6 weeks later he's dead.
I think it's the tragedy, you know, and the sorrow, because we can all relate to that. You know, why do we love soap operas so much? Because we see something within us of the poor person that's in the script. But interestingly enough, some people don't think that Van Gogh was the greatest painter. They think he was a brilliant painter, but perhaps not the greatest. But it's the story, it's all-encompassing. Did he cut off his earlobe and give it to a prostitute as a gift? You know, there's so many different myths and stories.
Van Gogh was born here in the Netherlands in 1853. And its capital, Amsterdam, has become the focal point for fans to pay homage to perhaps the country's greatest export.
He didn't become an artist until his late 20s, and in the following 10 years produced nearly 900 paintings, most in the last 2 years before he died, and the myth being he only actually sold one during his lifetime.
The Van Gogh Museum is visited by nearly 2 million people every year and holds the largest and most important collection of his paintings in the world. 200 of his oil paintings are on show here, the bulk from the last few years of his life in France, which were not only his most productive, but also his most troubled. This vast collection gives a fascinating insight into the extraordinary personality behind the art, as well as some of his techniques.
Vincent painted over 30 self-portraits, I believe. I mean, what does that say about him as a man? I mean, what kind of a character was he?
Vincent himself, he had a very stubborn personality. But that stubbornness, on the one hand, didn't really endear him necessarily to people around him, but on the other hand, it also meant that he was a very stubborn artist. You know, he pursued his calling, if you like, you know, also in a very stubborn way, in a very disciplined way. But that made, after all, that he, in a very short period of 10 years, you know, created this enormous amount of work and created this enormous legacy.
The museum also holds 400 drawings and 700 letters, many written to his beloved little brother Theo, who was Vincent's biggest supporter both emotionally and financially. and give a unique understanding into the mind of a genius.
His trials and tribulations he shares in his letters with his brother, with friends, but mostly with his brother. And he really does talk about the challenges that he experiences both as an artist but also in his daily life, and the loneliness that he experiences and the fact that he feels misunderstood. Also later on in his career, his frustration that he is not breaking through as an artist, that people don't understand his work, that he doesn't sell. Of course, you know, that is sort of a burden for him.
It was the last letter Vincent wrote to his brother a week before his death that inspired the film. He wrote, "We cannot speak other than by our paintings." And this is exactly what the filmmakers wanted to do, to tell the story of Van Gogh through his own work, letting the paintings tell his story. Loving Vincent is a groundbreaking film, fully painted by a team of more than 100 artists over a period of 5 years. It tells the story of Vincent van Gogh through his own paintings.
It's a painted animation, which means we shoot it like a normal movie. They then project every frame of the movie onto a canvas, and then artists paint over each frame in the style of Van Gogh.
In his lifetime, he was so unappreciated. People didn't, you know, he wasn't celebrated. He felt like he wasn't very good, but he was desperate to be an artist, and he just worked and worked at it. And I think to all artists that appeals.
People that are afraid to go into an art gallery because they feel intimidated, that want to find out more about the man himself, will really love this film, because it's almost like sitting talking to him. You know, you hear him come alive through his paintings. The paintings have sounds, they have words. It's like watching poetry about him.
Filmmakers came here to the Van Gogh Museum in Amsterdam to gain an insight into this great painter's work, his life, and his techniques.
Van Gogh's tragic life, his struggle with depression, the fact that he cut off his own ear and committed suicide are as famous as these self-portraits. But this film asked the question, did he actually shoot himself, or was it in fact murder, and attempts to reflect the man behind the madness?
The thing that really amazed me about Vincent was that he'd actually failed at 4 careers and was the black sheep of the family and completely depressed and alone when he was 27 years old. And he turned himself from someone who everyone had written off as a nobody, a non-entity, an unpleasant person, into probably the most famous artist in history.
This is the famous house that Vincent rented in Arles in the late 1880s, and which he described in detail to his brother Theo in his letters. And this is perhaps one of his most famous paintings, his bedroom. And these paintings, along with his letters, give an incredible insight into Vincent van Gogh's life and also his state of mind.
So the backdrop to these masterpieces is an enthralling and tragic story of a loner plagued by mental illness who never got to enjoy his own success. The beginning of the end for Vincent came when he cut off his ear, the point at which his illness began to take over.
He was sort of losing his facilities, that he was not in control of himself anymore. It may have led to hallucinations. We know from descriptions at the time that he also then had to be restrained because he started to eat paint. He felt he needed to commit himself to an institution, to the asylum in Saint-Rémy, where he actually voluntarily submitted himself because he felt he was no longer in control.
One theory that's been discredited is the idea that Van Gogh's madness fueled his artistic genius. On the contrary, Vincent made his best work when lucid.
There is this perceived notion that he was just mad, and that he was just crazy, and that, you know, he was just crazily flinging paint at the canvas and was sort of out of control. And that is something that is patently not true. I think we need to divorce the art that he made, the paintings that he created, from his illness, because he made them almost despite of his illness rather than because of it.
Here we have all of our paintings drying. So this is from the fight, got him in the rain. This one here, this is actually based upon the original painting of Armand Rouland.
To somehow reflect Van Gogh's genius, the filmmakers needed exceptionally talented artists who would not only be able to replicate his work, but would also be able to animate it.
It was very hard to convince them to paint in different style. They have to paint a couple of shots to get this, and then it's just like machines, you know, they paint like Van Gogh. I think the biggest problem is that you have to scratch it off. And then you just like, you paint amazing painting and you are so happy about this. It looks like Van Gogh painting, and then you just have to scratch it. You have to be very patient. So when you are an artist, you think that you are the best and that your work is super great, and then somebody told you that no, you have to change it, or you have to scratch it, or you have to delete frames, and then you have to struggle with yourself, with your ego actually.
So that's the dress, the white bit of the dress, and then that's the dress shadow. We work really hard, we work long hours, we do sort of 9-10 hour days, and sometimes the animation doesn't work as well as it should, and you'll be told to delete it and start again. So that sort of, having your work up for such intense criticism it's quite sort of, it's not belittling or anything, it's humbling. That's what reminds me of Van Gogh really. We're sort of in his footsteps.
I became faster. I was always a slow painter, but now because you have to paint fast. So you learn how to be kind of really concentrated and then just paint.
We need to be really patient because, of course, we're not machines.
Many have uprooted their lives to base themselves here in Poland for months, if not years, utterly dedicated to learning Vincent's style.
I've worked here for 8 months. 8.
And that's it now, no more? You're going home?
Yes, I want to go home, see my children, to rest, and yeah.
Best thing that's ever happened to me. Sometimes I hate it, sometimes I love it. It's like a roller coaster. Yeah, it's been fun all the way and exciting.
When an unofficial trailer was leaked on Facebook, the response was staggering, attracting over 100 million views within weeks.
It just went mad, and I saw it popping up on my Facebook feed with all my friends, and people, they didn't even know I was in it, going, "Have you seen this? This is amazing." I was like, actually, I'm in it. I haven't actually had so much interest in the movie I've made from my peers and people my age, ever. Everyone thinks it's the coolest thing ever.
There are few films where the filmmaking process is as fascinating as the film itself, but that is certainly the case here.
Our opening shot of the film, we descend from Starry Night down over Arles, past the Yellow House and into the famous night cafe. And that shot is 1,250 frames, which meant we had to do 625 paintings. And because it was a moving shot, they pretty much had to do a new painting each time. So we had 3 painters working on that shot for over 6 months. We have definitely, without a doubt, invented the slowest form of filmmaking ever devised in 120 years.
Starry, starry night, paint your palette blue and grey.
I imagine he would love to know that All these years later, 100 artists who really are completely inspired by him are putting this work into his story.
Shadows on the hills, sketch the trees and the daffodils.
I just hope that he's watching from his art studio on the cloud and thinking, yeah, we actually appreciate him now. He saw beauty in everything, be it sunrise or a sunset or a sunflower.
Colors changing hue.
His art, his life story, the drama, the perceived drama of his life, and the myth that has arisen, you know, that makes for just this, you know, global icon that he is nowadays.
Now I understand.
I love that you can see the human touch to it. It's not perfect because the brushstrokes are changing the whole time, so it feels alive and the paint is alive. And when you have it on that scale on the cinema screens, I hope to be quite magical.
Perhaps they'll listen now, for they could not love you.
In a world where everything seems to be going digital and so many decisions are driven by saving time and money, the choice to spend years painstakingly painting tens of thousands of canvases seems about more than just authenticity. This is a labour of love and proof there are some things modern technology just can't capture.
Your love was true. And when no hope was left inside on that starry, starry night, you took your life as lovers often do. But I could have told you, Vincent, this world was never meant for one as beautiful